Wow, it's day 5 already. Is it possible our trip is half over? As you can see, it's another busy day.
Here we are on the Mount of Olives.
Pater Noster is Latin for Our Father. It was built on the site that Jesus taught the Lord's Prayer, located on the Mount of Olives. There are over 100 plaques that have the Lord's Prayer written in different languages, including some in Braille. These plaques are both in the large courtyard and in the halls of the church.
We are now entering the cave where Jesus taught the Our Father. In Luke's Gospel, before Jesus teaches the Our Father, he spends time in prayer by himself. This cave on the Mount of Olives played an important role in Jesus' own prayer life. It was a familiar place of rest. Why? Well, the cave is located on a route that he would have traveled often because he frequently visited his good friends, Martha, Mary, and Lazarus. And we also know that Jesus went to this hill in his greatest hour of need. His agony in the Garden of Gethsemane happened just at the bottom of the hill.
Here we are on Palm Sunday Road overlooking Jerusalem. In the background, there is a Jewish cemetery on the left and the Golden Dome of the Rock. The Jewish cemetery is on the highest place of Mount Olives. The Jews believe when God comes on the last day, they will be the first on the day of resurrection of the dead. The Dome of the Rock is one of the 3 most holy sites of the Muslim faith. It is the site where Abraham bound his son Isaac to offer him as a sacrifice, but his hand was stayed by a messenger of God.
Palm Sunday Road is quite steep and narrow. Although it is less than a half a mile long, it descends 400 feet. Jesus' final entry into Jerusalem had a special meaning. He solemnly entered as a humble king of peace. Traditionally, entering the city on a donkey symbolizes arrival in peace. If he had entered on a horse, it would have symbolized a war-waging king.
A cutout in the wall gives us a view of a Jewish cemetery. The handrail in this picture really illustrates the pitch of the road.
The picture gives you an incredible view of the Jewish cemetery on the Mount of Olives. Because of the lack of real estate, graves are very close together.
Ever wonder why stones and not flowers are left in a Jewish cemetery? Stones are left because they will not die.
In Jesus' time, when a person died, the body was wrapped in a shroud and placed on a stone bench in the family's burial cave. Later, bones would be taken to be put in these small stone boxes called ossuaries. This made room for more deceased family members. Interestingly, the size of the ossuary was dictated by the longest bone, which is the femur, and the widest bone, which is the skull.
The crown of thorns Jesus wore came from a perennial shrub with stout thorns. The shrub pictured on the left is so large it looks like a tree. The close-up on the right shows the large thorns. The next 2 pictures show 2 different types of crowns.
This is the one that we normally picture on Christ's head. and it is the type that has been preserved at the Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris. The next picture shows a helmet-type crown of thorns from that time period.
This crown of thorns was recreated for the Shroud of Turin exhibit and matches the wounds on Jesus' head.
Here we are, resting, as we overlook Jerusalem from the Mount of Olives. Such a peaceful place to contemplate all that we have seen and done.
The Garden of Gethsemane is where Jesus went to pray before his ordeal on the cross of Calvary. Gethsemane has a couple of meanings. First, it's derived from the Aramaic word meaning oil press. Then, in Matthew and Mark's Gospel, it's a place or an estate.
The root system of this olive tree, which is in the Garden of Gethsemane, is a descendant of the original tree that was from the time of Jesus.
You now see the Basilica of the Agony, also on the Mount of Olives. This church enshrines a section of bedrock where Jesus prayed and wept before his arrest. Notice the Garden of Gethsemane on the left. Let's tour the inside.
Before we celebrated Mass, we touched the bedrock where Jesus prayed and wept before his arrest. The incredible metalwork surrounding the bedrock is a reminder of the crown of thorns.
The interior of the Basilica of the Agony has so many mosaics. This mosaic shows Jesus as he wept and prayed.
Here is the Jerusalem cross, which is in red, and here's the story behind it. The large middle cross represents Jesus Christ, who lived, died, saved us, and rose again in Jerusalem. The four small crosses are symbolic of the four Gospels: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. They also represent the four corners of the world, which Jesus commanded his disciples to go and spread his message.
Here we are at the Dominus Flevit Church, which means the Lord wept. The view from the church, situated on the Mount of Olives, overlooks the old city of Jerusalem. The church is designed in the shape of a tear. The vases on the corners symbolize the tears that were caught and stored in vases. Vessels were used to catch and preserve the owner's tears during times of grief or extreme pressure. Mourners filled small glass vials or cups with tears and placed them in burial tombs as symbols of love and respect. Sometimes women were even paid to cry into cups as they walked along the mourning procession. The tear vases were then placed in the tomb.
Diane and I are touching the original 7th century mosaics within the Dominus Flevit Church.
Here is a great view of Jerusalem from Dominus Flevit. The walls of the old city of Jerusalem can be seen in the background.
Below the church of St. Peter in Gallicantu is the sacred pit, where Jesus was imprisoned overnight as he awaited trial before Caiaphas and the Sanhedrin.
The statue of Servus Domini, meaning the servant of the Lord, is located just before entering the sacred pit. The pit itself is a small area, about 15 by 15 feet, and about 20 feet deep. No windows, no doors, no lights. The only way in or out was for a prisoner to be lowered by rope, tied around their shoulders and chest, and lowering them in through the small hole in the roof, alone and forgotten. Then Jesus was taken out and led through a dungeon, where the dark, narrow pathways would have been lit by torches, where he was scourged and beaten. You will see a representation of the straps bolted to the stone that held him as he was scourged. Now let's enter where Jesus was thrown into the sacred pit via the opening in the ceiling. We gathered in the sacred pit to pray and to remember. Now let's go to the Dormition Abbey.
The Dormition Abbey is located on Mount Zion in the Kidron Valley. Dormition is Latin for deep sleep. The empty tomb of the Virgin Mary is located below.
We gather around the statue of the reclining Mary, who looks toward her Son as depicted in the mosaic above. Originally, the gown of the figure of Mary was of chased silver and gold plated. The face and the hands are ivory.
Here is the mosaic in the cupola above the reclining Mary. The mosaic depicts Jesus waiting for her with wide open arms to take her up to heaven, body and soul. He is surrounded by 6 women of the Old Testament who walked with God in their own way: Eve and Miriam, Ruth and Esther, Jael and Judith.
Normally, when we see a painting of Mary, she is holding the baby Jesus. Here, the artist portrays Mary as a baby in Jesus' arms, in the same way his mother held him when he was a little child.
Below the Dormition Abbey, we visited the empty tomb of Mary. As you descend the 47 steps to Mary's tomb, the tombs of her parents, St. Joachim and St. Anne, are there. St. Joseph, her husband, is also buried there.
The upper room where the Last Supper was held is located on the upper floor of King David's tomb. The next picture will give you a sense of the size of the upper room. Did you ever imagine this room was so big or so grand? I know I didn't.
King David's tomb, which is on Mount Zion in Jerusalem. When visiting the tomb of King David, women and men are separated.
The Church of St. Peter is in Gallicantu. The name Gallicantu means cock's crow. Do you see the cock on the top of the lodge dome roof? This church is on the site that Peter denied Jesus. It's also where Peter, after hearing the cock crow, shed tears after denying Jesus 3 times. In addition, this is the site of Caiaphas's palace, where Jesus was held after his arrest on Holy Thursday.
The door to St. Peter's Church depicts the story of Peter's betrayal of Christ. Note, there are 11 apostles. Judas is omitted. Above the door, the inscription reads, "May the Lord watch over your entrance and exit."
Inside the Church of St. Peter's, there's a spectacular cruciform window.
How many times have we read or heard of the Kidron Valley? Well, here it is. The view of the Kidron Valley from the Mount Zion is shown.
These are the original stairs that led from the Kidron Valley to the top of Mount Zion. Jesus and his apostles made this walk after the Last Supper to the grotto at Gethsemane. It was in Gethsemane where Jesus was captured and brought back to walk on these stairs to be then locked in the sacred pit.
Oskar Schindler's grave is in the Franciscan Cemetery on Mount Zion. Schindler had requested to be buried in Jerusalem. Oskar Schindler saved 1,200 Jews from extermination. He was the only member of the Nazi Party to be honored this way. The Jews leave stones as their way of saying thank you.
This is the hotel where we had dinner in one of Jerusalem's neighborhoods. See the picture on the left? Joe is quite fascinated with the pop-top beer bottle. He'd never seen one of those before. We had really great food, beer and wine. Perfect.
Today, we start our day with a 3:30 a.m. wake-up call.
"4:45 a.m. We are on our way to the Via Dolorosa, or the Way of the Cross. Why did we go so early? To avoid the crowds and vendors in the markets. You will see the cobblestone street fills up very quickly, and it would have made it very difficult to pray at the Stations of the Cross. I want you to be aware there will be an audio clip on the 5th station. This will give you a good idea of what it was like to hear the Muslim call to prayer while we were in the middle of our prayers."
We are now in the Via Dolorosa. We are solemn and quiet as we make our way. The third station. Jesus falls for the first time. The fifth station. Simon of Cyrene helps Jesus to carry his cross.
الله أكبر الله أكبر أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله.
At the fifth station, the Muslim call to prayer started without warning. The speakers blared, and it was very difficult to concentrate on our prayers. We just heard 17 seconds of this call to prayer. The original lasted approximately 3 minutes, but seemed much, much longer.
This is the eighth station. Jesus meets the women of Jerusalem.
We have now completed the Stations of the Cross. We ended at the courtyard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Let's enter the church.
We are now inside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. What we see is the stone of unction, also called the stone of anointing. This is where Jesus' body was washed and oiled after being removed from the cross. He was then placed into a burial cave that belonged to Joseph of Arimathea, who donated it for Jesus' burial.
We now climb the narrow stone steps to touch where Jesus' cross stood.
A Mass was being celebrated as we passed by.
We are now entering the area where the cross stood.
Here we are in Golgotha, at the rock formation where Jesus' cross stood. You can see this rock formation on the left and the right of the altar. Below the altar, there is a round opening. We knelt and placed our hand down the opening to touch the rock that had supported Jesus' cross.
This large structure, called the Edicule, was built around Jesus' tomb.
Before we entered the tomb, we celebrated a Latin Mass with the Franciscan monks chanting in front of the Edicule. What an incredible experience!
Inside the Edicule is the tomb of Jesus. We were allowed a few seconds to enter, kneel, and kiss the stone. It's now about 9 a.m., and we're back outside at the courtyard of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
The Gospel of John describes Jesus as healing the paralytic in the Bethesda pool. This pool is described as having 5 porticos, a puzzling feature suggesting an unusual 5-sided pool, which most scholars dismissed as a literary creation. Yet, when this site was excavated, it revealed a rectangular pool with 2 basins separated by a wall, thus a 5-sided pool, and each side had a portico.
I don't know about you, but I was not expecting the pools to be 42.5 feet deep. Who knew they would be this deep?
Father Francis is shown administering the anointing of the sick at the pools of Bethesda.
The Church of St. Anne commemorates where Mary was born. Our guide talked about Mary's parents, St. Anne and St. Joachim, as grandparents of Jesus. I guess I never considered or thought about Jesus had grandparents.
The interior of the Church of St. Anne. It was here that our group assembled on the steps of the sanctuary and sang Immaculate Mary. The acoustics are said to be the best in all of Jerusalem. The experience was incredibly overwhelming.
We then descended the steps to visit where Mary was born. The artist depicts St. Anne, her husband St. Joachim, and the baby Mary.
This is the Christmas tree lighting at the Notre Dame Center in Jerusalem. It turns out this is done for the townspeople, featuring bagpipers, dancers, and fireworks. We just happened to be there at the right time.
Here I am up on the roof of the Notre Dame Center. What a view, huh?
Here is a nighttime view of the wall that surrounds the old city of Jerusalem. Some interesting facts. The wall is 2.5 miles long, and the average height is 39 feet and is 8 feet thick. The wall also contains 34 watchtowers and 7 main gates, which are open for traffic.
What a way to end the day. A nighttime view of the old city of Jerusalem. Okay, now we're at day 7. One of the things I've been looking forward to is having dinner with a Christian Palestinian family. As you can see, it's tonight.
We wanted to give you an idea of what everyday Palestine looks like. These are pictures from the bus driving to Bethlehem.
Here we see the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. A close-up of the door opening shows that it has been reduced to approximately 4 feet tall. This ensures visitors must bow to enter in a sign of humility. Consequently, it is called the Door of Humility.
Our group is waiting in the reception area of the Church of the Nativity, quietly and respectfully whispering the Rosary.
While we prayed the Rosary, we were taking in our surroundings when suddenly we heard a strong voice.
Stop praying.
We continued our Rosary even quieter. Then we heard the voice again.
Stop praying.
I'm sure you are wondering why we were told to stop praying in a church. Apparently, reverent silence is required when visiting this holy site. At this point, our guide told us to pray the Rosary in the quiet of our hearts.
Now the moment we have been waiting for. We are now entering the cave where Jesus was born.
Once inside the cave, we see the star that marks the exact place where Jesus was born. The star has an inscription, "Here Jesus was born to the Virgin Mary." The star itself has 14 points. These represent the 14 generations of Jesus Christ from Abraham to David, then from David to the Babylon captivity, and after that from the Babylon captivity to Jesus Christ. In addition, 14 points also represent the 14 stations of the cross, or the Via Dolorosa.
Now we are at St. Catherine's Church in Bethlehem. It is the site where Jesus appeared to St. Catherine and announced her coming martyrdom.
As you can see, the vaulted ceiling takes your breath away. It's so light, so beautiful, and majestic.
The Milk Grotto Church is where the Holy Family took refuge during the slaughter of the innocents before their flight to Egypt. When the Virgin Mary was nursing baby Jesus, a drop of milk fell on the chalky rock, changing its color to pure white. Both Christians and Muslims believe that scrapings from the stones in the grotto increases the quantity of a mother's milk and enhances fertility.
This church is in a grotto which is hollowed out of soft rock.
Our Lady of the Milk is a beautiful metal image which is on the front door of the Milk Grotto.
A monastery of the Sisters of Perpetual Adoration of the Blessed Sacrament is attached to the chapel. The red and white clad nuns practice perpetual Eucharistic adoration.
Yes, we had lunch at Cheers in Palestine. They certainly knew our guide, George.
An angel announced the birth of Jesus to shepherds in Shepherd's Field. The angel's good news was not given to the noble or the pious, but to workers with a low reputation. Jewish literature ranks shepherd as among the most despised occupation of the time, but Jesus was to identify himself with this occupation when he called himself the Good Shepherd.
Here are more views of Shepherd's Field.
This is the tent-shaped chapel of the angels, located within Shepherd's Field. The cupola has a Latin version of the song which a host of angels sang to the shepherds shortly after the birth of Jesus. It means, "Glory in the highest to God, and on earth peace to men of good will."
Herodian Mountain. This is where a mountain was moved from one site to add to the other mountain. We saw the crater that was left behind when the original mountain was transported by slaves to build Herodian Mountain. King Herod, who ordered this mountain to be moved, named it after himself.
Constructed in 23 BC to commemorate a battle he would never forget, Herod the Great built Herodian Mountain. It was meant as a summer palace with a wonderful view of Jerusalem and the Judean desert, but it also provided him with sanctuary close to the holy city if it became necessary to flee.
The top of Herodian Mountain was carved out for Herod's palace. The mountain gave Herod's soldiers a 360-degree view of the area, thus eliminating a surprise attack. Herod added an elaborate palace complex which served as both a country club and administrative center. A large, impressive pool surrounded by pillars was 229 feet long by 147 feet and almost 10 feet deep. The complex included houses for his clerks, storehouses, administrative buildings, and magnificent gardens.
The moment I was waiting for, dinner with a Christian family in Palestine. 9 families were visited by 6 or 7 pilgrims. The woman serving is the mother, and moving to her left is her son, her husband, and over her husband's right shoulder, his mom. The main dish was made with chicken, potatoes, tomatoes, and eggplant. In addition, we had salad, pita, and saffron rice. For dessert, she made a chocolate cake that contained wine made by local Catholic nuns. The overall atmosphere was of hospitality, and it was said many times by the family, "All we want is peace."
Breaking bread and sharing food really brings people together.
Day 8. It's hard to describe the amount of incredible moments and views I've had during this trip. That feeling helps me to look forward to more incredible moments in the day ahead.
Here are the Judean hills. Once upon a time, this specific area was heavily populated and hosted countless famous biblical events, including the iconic battle of David and Goliath.
Joseph went from the town of Nazareth to Bethlehem because a Roman census was held. He went to be registered with Mary, to whom he was engaged and who was expecting a child. Poor Mary! Think of this terrain as Mary traveled from one area to another over 90 miles. I cannot imagine being pregnant and riding a donkey over these mountains. Oh, and don't forget the heat.
Can you see the Greek Orthodox monastery of St. George?
Here is a close-up of the monastery. There are a handful of monks who still live here.
Here we are at Jesus' baptismal site on the Jordan River. Some decided to go in completely into the water. I'm sure you have noticed that the water is dark. It's brown because of all the silt that churns up from the bottom. Father Francis went in with his pure white habit and came out without a stain. Wow!
Here's a nice picture overlooking the Jordan River and the landscape.
Here we are back on the bus in Palestine on our way to Jericho.
Here is a sycamore tree in Jericho. If you remember, Zacchaeus climbed a tree to get a better look at Jesus. He was short and so was unable to see Jesus through the crowd. When Jesus reached the spot, he looked up at the sycamore tree, addressed Zacchaeus by name, and told him to come down, for he intended to visit his house. The crowd was shocked that Jesus, a religious teacher and prophet, would lower himself by being a guest of a sinner.
The center mountain is the Mount of Temptation in the Judean desert, where Jesus was tempted by the devil 3 times.
Is there anything better than pita right out of the stone oven? I dipped it in the fresh olive oil and herbs. So good! I guess Joe took the picture of this water bottle to remember where we were. How about a sit-down lunch for 57 people? On the menu were fresh olives, hummus, just baked pita, roast chicken, and fresh lemonade.
Talk about good!
Mmm. The left picture shows the Qumran caves, where the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. The right picture shows the actual vase some of the scrolls were in. Did anyone bother to read this sign? Dead Sea instructions could save your life. It is dangerous to drink Dead Sea water. If you do swallow water, immediately notify either the lifeguard or first aid personnel in order to receive medical treatment. Floating on your stomach is forbidden. Diving in the water is forbidden. Do not put your head under water. Do not splash water on yourself or others. Entering the Dead Sea can be dangerous for people suffering from high blood pressure or other heart conditions. Children are permitted in the Dead Sea only when accompanied by an adult. Oh yeah, have fun.
And they did have fun.
We were told the Dead Sea was losing 3 feet of water per year. This is due to not only evaporation, but the water is being used for irrigation. Officials are trying to resolve this problem that is only worsening.
Here is a beautiful sunset from the parking lot of the Dead Sea.
Day 9. Here we are on our final day, our last day. I just know the Wailing Wall will be emotional.
Across from our hotel in Jerusalem was a shopping district for any last-minute gifts that we had forgotten.
On our way to our last lunch in Israel. Oh, and shopping too.
We are now walking to the Wailing Wall. This was the only daytime rain that we had encountered in the whole trip.
Here we are at the Wailing Wall. The partition, which is hidden by the closed umbrella, separates the sexes, men on the left and women on the right.
Our prayers and petitions were placed in the Wailing Wall. Every couple of weeks, the slips of paper are removed and burned. The idea is the smoke and the ashes rise to heaven.
The picture shows the Church of St. John the Baptist in Jerusalem. Here, I'm touching the place of St. John's birth.
Here we are celebrating Mass on Sunday, December 8th. Wouldn't you know, we had a reading that was about St. John the Baptist. It's pretty surreal when you hear the reading of St. John the Baptist and you are where he was born.
Here we are having our farewell dinner. You could say our Last Supper. Here we are, the pilgrims who came together from around the world who became family. I hope you enjoyed this trip of Israel with us. I sincerely hope you will go to this most wonderful part of the world and experience it for yourself. You won't be disappointed. God bless.